Bruce Feldman, senior writer, theathletic.com, has been covering sports, college football for a long, long time. His fifth annual NFL mock draft based on the intel from speaking to dozens of college coaches. And he has it out. We have it in front of us. And so is Bruce Feldman. He joins us with Paul and Craig, David Smoak, 365 Sports. Bruce, thank you very much. You are tied in so heavily with the college game, because you also have the freak list, which is amazing, that everyone looks forward to, I think, usually in the summer. And so with this as well, was there any question whatsoever among those you talked to about Cam Ward being the first quarterback taken ahead of Shedeur Sanders?
Ahead of Shedeur Sanders, no. The first pick in the draft, yes.
Okay.
Some of the guys I talked to, including one coach who faced most of the first-round quarterbacks last year, that he saw Jaden Daniels, he saw obviously Caleb, he saw Michael Penix Jr. and Bo Nix, and this particular coach said, I would pick all those guys ahead of Cam Ward. Now, there's a lot he likes about Cam Ward, starting with his competitiveness and his ability to extend plays, playmaking ability, arm talent, but he said he's also really reckless with the football, and he got a little better at that, but I think that's the part that gives a lot of people some pause with him. It's not surprising that he is talked about as a first-round quarterback, first pick of the draft. I mean, it feels like it's always a crapshoot when it comes to quarterbacks in the NFL. I mean, if you right now, you would say the Commanders have a much more sure thing than the first pick in the draft last year, which is Caleb, and the jury's still out on Caleb. And look, the jury's honestly still out on like Trevor Lawrence, and there's a bunch of other guys who fizzled out. So, the things I've heard, and again, a lot of these coaches saw both Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders and faced them, because at one point they were both in the Pac-12 in 2023. And Shedeur, there's a lot they like, but there's also, he takes a lot of bad sacks, and he's not the athlete that people, he's certainly not the athlete that Caleb is or Jaden Daniels, who are the guys at the top of the draft. So the stuff he didn't really get away with last year with extending plays behind a bad offensive line, he's going to have even more trouble with in the NFL against much better athletes than what he saw this past year in the Big 12.
What did coaches tell you about what they would do with Travis Hunter? We were at Big 12 Pro Days. Cordell Stewart / himself was very adamant about coaches shouldn't try to make him one thing or the other. They should just let him be Travis Hunter. What are you hearing from coaches about that?
They thought he was elite at both positions, but that it's harder to find a true shutdown corner than it is a big play receiver. And so I think that's the part where, what does he want to do? I mean, we're in uncharted waters just in that we've seen other truly elite cornerbacks who dabbled on offense, whether it was Charles Woodson or Champ Bailey. We never saw anybody do to the extent he did it, to the way he did it, of what Travis Hunter did at Colorado both seasons. I mean, he is a remarkable athlete. I think he will be a more of a surefire success in the NFL, whatever position he plays, than anybody else in this draft. I mean, the quarterback rate is dicey when it comes to whether it's Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders or Jackson Dart. Abdul Carter's a freaky athlete, but we've seen speed rushers who get pegged as one-dimensional. Mason Graham's a good interior D lineman, but I just feel like, and then there's offensive linemen that people have their questions about too. I think this guy is going to be an elite NFL player. It's just, will somebody give him the chance to major in both things, or will they say, hey, you're going to be our cornerback and we'll give you a package at receiver, just because we've never seen anybody do it in the NFL the way he did it at Colorado.
Another Big 12 wide receiver there in the first round, Tetero McMillan. Bruce, it seems like the guys that you talked to raved about his play and maybe felt like some of the lazy critiques are maybe overrated to some extent. Is he a guy that's getting maybe a little bit of that pre-draft knock that's not exactly fair to his overall game?
Yeah, some of the coaches I talked to, especially the guys, some of the guys I respect most in here because of their track record, felt that. And they said his ball skills are rare. You're talking about a 6'4", 220-pound former volleyball star who will not run a 40. It's not like he's going to run 4.49. You know, people wonder about just how fast he is, but they see on film he can run away from some guys. The other thing was, as you guys know, when last year in the Big 12, Arizona was awful. Everybody knew where the quarterback was going to go with the football. It was like he was option 1, 2, and 3. That was his best friend out there. He'd been fantastic the year before. And I just think that was a guy that they leaned on so much. I think in the NFL, he's going to be a legit go-to big play guy. If people are saying, hey, he's a better version of Drake London put up some really big numbers last year for the Falcons. I think he's having seen both in the Pac-12 and having seen both, I think he is better than Drake London is really good, but I do think this guy is a little more special than Drake London is.
Obviously, Travis Hunter's unique and a freak when it comes to what he can do. I saw some of the quotes from a defensive coordinator that he's a defensive back, but he's also a fantastic receiver. Is he one that, with the game being the NFL, are there still some that are intrigued about will they play him a little bit at times as a wide receiver?
I think they will, because he is a guy who still has some difference-making ball skills. And it depends on how loaded you are outside. I mean, it's not like he's going to end up with the Commanders, but if you're a team that has Terry McLaurin and Deebo Samuel, how many footballs can you spread around, right? But I think he is just such a freaky athlete in terms of, you know, what was he going to run the 40 in? He wasn't going to run it, you know, at the combine. One of the coaches I talked to at Colorado was like, I would guess he's like 4.38, 4.40, which is obviously fast, but it's not like, oh my God, fast. But he said, if you lined up all the fastest guys at the combine, I would bet my money on Travis to win the race, because he just, whatever he's going to jump, he'll jump higher if the ball's up there than anybody else will. And we saw a lot of evidence of that. Just rare playmaking ability. I can think of in the last 2 years, dating back to some big plays he made in the first game that he played in FBS football in the opener when we were in Fort Worth against TCU, just jaw-dropping plays. And he just has a rare knack for that. And I just think he's a little different than everybody else in the draft in that regard.
Who was the player that when you called coaches and asked them about that they raved about the most?
That's a good question. There's a few that come to mind where you get people who just kind of were like wowed by some of the stuff. You know, Armand Membo from Missouri is a young offensive lineman who's super explosive. He did well at the combine, but when he talked about what he did against one of the best young defensive linemen in college football in the SEC from South Carolina, just completely dominated him. And so you see stuff like that where somebody just jumps out and they talk about a guy in terms of just what they think. Jalen Walker from Georgia is another one. You know, you talk to the guys at Texas, they saw him twice. They don't, you know, he's different. I mean, there's a lot of elite edge rusher guys in the SEC, and the guys who face him multiple and they come away with Jalen Walker was like the scariest guy they saw in college football. He was a good off the ball linebacker. He's an even more disruptive and scary edge rusher on third downs. I think he was one that, take Travis Hunter out of this, I think he was one that somebody would say, hey, he might have been the best defensive player and best player in college football, given the competition he was going up against.
Bruce, I don't know if there's anything exact to this or not, but did you notice when looking through just all the consolidation and just all of the movement in college football, the rules changes, does it feel like there's a concentration of more of the power schools in the draft, or is it about the same that it's been? I mean, I noticed Genty's obviously one of those non-guys. You had a couple of other players as well, a young man from Marshall, an offensive lineman. But does it feel like it's the same as it's always been, or is this like something else that is slowly, if not quickly, changing and evolving to, I guess, basically be more about the big schools?
I think it's that. I mean, towards your point, though, think about it this way. If I have Cam Ward as the number one pick in the draft, that's a guy who started his career at Incarnate Word, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, let's credit to Eric Morris and the group down there in San Antonio, because they were the ones who took a chance on him. There's other coaches I talked to for this who were like, yeah, the coach at Baytown Lee turned me on to this kid. We just didn't have enough film for our offensive coordinator to go on. but we liked what we saw. So you see some guys like that. There's a bunch of guys who may have started out at a smaller place and then ended up getting either bigger opportunity or certainly bigger on NIL to bounce to a bigger school. But, you mentioned, you alluded to the one offensive lineman from North Dakota State. I mean, that Missouri Valley Conference and FCS is cranking out NFL offensive linemen. The kid at Marshall was at Virginia initially. There's definitely some character questions that came to light around the combine. Talent-wise, Charles Huff, who was the coach now at Southern Miss, was an assistant at Alabama when they had Will Anderson, and he'd been telling me since the start of the season, this guy reminds me of Will Anderson. And obviously Will Anderson, as you guys well know, tore it up in the NFL, so that's high praise.
Bruce Feldman with us on 365 Sports. So if everybody in the draft needed a running back, how quickly would Ashton Genty be picked? Or would, because of the other positions that are played and what maybe people think about the running back position, how quickly would he actually go off the board?
I think there's a little bit of it's the flavor of the ice cream. There's some guys I know who like him. They don't necessarily love him, to be a top 10 pick. I mean, I talked to some people who rave about Omarion Hampton, who's a bigger running back at North Carolina. They feel like, this one coach who's been in the ACC for over a decade was like, he's one of the 3 best running backs I've seen in the last decade. So, and I do think you see enough running backs over time. There's a guy that turns out to be way better in the NFL than we thought. That just seems like it always happens like that. I mean, look, David Montgomery, who we all saw a lot of in the Big 12, was terrific at Iowa State, has been a hell of a player for the Lions, and there's just, it's one of those positions that back when some of us grew up watching the NFL, we remember Franco Harris and Tony Dorsett and Earl Campbell and these were like the bell cow running backs. That era, it's kind of pendulum back a little bit with Saquon, but I feel like, you just don't see it like, oh, we're going to take this guy as a top 10 pick because there's only so much of the shelf life on the running backs and the way the contracts are set up.
Bruce, this is an interesting way to go about building a mock draft and building your thoughts about it and going through, because, it is a total crapshoot because you have no idea what the teams are actually thinking, and there's so many lies out there. But when you call these coaches you've had relationship with for a long time, do you find it like, do some guys have agendas, or is this one of the things where they kind of just pull the wall down and just give you the straight dirt?
I think because of how I'm doing this one, I'm not trying to say, hey, this is who the Giants are definitely going to take, because I'm not calling the Giants about it. I may have conversations with coaches at the combine for those teams, but those aren't honestly the decision makers. What I'm really trying to do here with this is show to the fans, who a lot of them are more NFL fans than they are pure college diehards. And so I want them to get a clearer picture of what the guys who actually know best about the players. And these are the coaches who either coach them, or most of them that are quoted in here are the ones who faced them and game plan and scouted and know what they actually do, what they're actually trying to do to defend them or try to take advantage of them or try to mitigate them. And again, it's not to diminish the work of personnel people or people who are in the draft space, because I think they do a great job. But this is just from that perspective. Now, when I turned this in over the weekend, the Giants hadn't signed Jameis Winston as a quarterback. And I know how you talk to enough people in the NFL, the system the Giants run is not a very easy system to pick up for young quarterbacks. The chances of them taking any quarterback that high up, I think, is probably not great at this point. But it's also like a jigsaw puzzle in terms of if you don't have this guy or whatever. But I think what I'm trying to do with this story, and I think for people who, are curious about the players, this is about as close to a real scoop on what the intel about what coaches actually think about Shedeur Sanders, or think about Tyler Warren, or think about, you name it, Cam Ward or Travis Hunter, or, Teteroa McMillan, all these guys, because I don't think the coaches have any reason to lie. There are a lot of coaches, because I've been doing this for a long time, who are guys that, you had mentioned, I referenced one of the defensive coordinators, like I know when this guy's been really spot on about a guy, just because some of the stuff over time. And so I probably put more stock in that guy's words than maybe I do in somebody I've only talked to, for a year or so. So it's kind of an interesting process to go through and back check how right some of these guys end up being.
How many of those and that you have in your mock first round are players that some teams wouldn't touch?
Good question. So, I alluded to Mike Green. That's the player for Marshall's, an edge rusher.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know exactly what, where there's hesitation on. James Pierce Jr. was a really good tester at the combine, ran 4.47 at 245 pounds, and is a productive player at Tennessee. I know there's some character concerns about him.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he's off somebody's board or not. There's been a time or two where there's been guys with more. I remember a few years ago, I do another draft piece closer to the draft. I'm talking to NFL people and position coaches, and George Pickens, really talented receiver at Georgia, who the Steelers took. There was a lot of question marks about him character-wise. And quite honestly, a lot of those things have bared out. He's made some spectacular plays. He's also, frustrated a lot of people, who are Steeler fans and Steeler, people. And so I think that, you're trying to be responsible how you're putting it out there. Because also, I think if somebody told me, hey, he's off our draft board, and they said it about a player that I haven't heard anything about, I would be hesitant to put that out there, to be honest, because there's no accountability
right
towards that person. So I don't want to be, potentially used in that way or use the platform that way, because that's not something how I would do it. So, it's a good question, and I think that's the best way I could explain.
No, it's a great way, and I surely wasn't trying to put you on the spot. There are a ton of offensive and defensive linemen. We know you can't really win in the NFL if you don't have a great quarterback, so that's why it's always so much intrigue about that. But there seems to be a lot of guys that will try to get to the quarterback, and even more that will try to prevent somebody from getting to the quarterback. Is this one of the better first rounds when it comes to the offense and defensive line, and either run stoppers, pluggers, whatever, and or the guys that can get to the quarterback?
I think it is a good D-line draft. There's a couple of coaching staffs that I talked to. They may have faced 6 or 7 first round guys between edge rushers and D linemen. You look at, to be honest, the guys at Ohio State, they faced Mike Green from Marshall. They faced 2 potential first rounders at Oregon on the D line. They faced 2 likely first rounders at Michigan. They faced James Pierce Jr., who I think will go first round from Tennessee. I'm trying to think if there was that's already 6 or 7. I feel like there's a couple others. They faced Abdul Carter from Penn State, who could be the first pick of the draft. That doesn't even include Zane Durant and Denai Dennis Sutton, who could be first rounders next year. So, there's a lot of really good D linemen in this draft. I don't know if there's a great one, but I think there's a lot of really, really legit top 15 kind of guys out there. It depends on what exactly you need.
So you have Jackson Dart as the third quarterback going, and a lot of experts wouldn't have pegged him with a first-round grade. He may not have a first-round grade, but what have you heard about him from the coaches regarding his viability in the NFL? Because I think a lot of people have kind of forgotten about him a little bit. He got a little bit left in the wash in the postseason of this.
Yeah, I think people like him. I don't think they love him. He's got good size. He's got a good arm. He's a good athlete. He got better at taking care of the ball. There were some issues about him as a turnover guy. The thing I heard people love the most is his toughness. And they think he has some real leadership skills related to that toughness. Now, the downside is this was a team that kind of underachieved. Talent-wise, they probably had enough talent to be a playoff team. They lost to a really bad Kentucky team at home. They lost to LSU. They lost to a pretty mediocre Florida team. You have 3 losses, none turn out to be ranked opponents. That's not good, especially like I said, they had a lot of talent. And the Kentucky team was probably the worst team in the SEC, or one of the 2 worst. You lost it at home. That is a little bit of a reflection of the quarterback. I mean, it's more a reflection of the team itself, but I could see if teams talk themselves out into needing a quarterback. You have Tyler Shuck, who's older, who has a little more injury history. People like his athleticism. They like his arm. They obviously really like his size. But I don't know if they talk themselves into him as a first round quarterback. I'm not sure they do with Jackson Dart either. But usually, I feel like people, when in doubt, they end up kind of leaning into that. And that's a team that still has some quarterback questions.
Bruce, if you don't mind, one more question that's out of the draft. The House settlement, as you know, that hearing is on Monday that everyone's been discussing for what seemed like forever. What do you expect is going to happen? Or is this just another part where there be yet another 2 or 3 months down the road where you think there's going to be something that happens in a decision one way or the other pretty quickly?
I think we'll get something heading into the summer, where we're looking at, okay, here's the money that's going to be schools are going to have to figure out how they want to use and everything like that. It just, again, it's tough to read what's going to happen in the courts necessarily, but people have been pointing at this for so long. I don't know if it's going to be cut and dry Tuesday morning. It's like, hey, we know where everything's going to be headed, but I feel like in that direction, it's probably going to get a little more clarity over the next couple of weeks.
Well, we hope so, huh? Just so we know what we have going forward, because it's been a raucous 5 years, no doubt, since COVID, transfer portal, NIL, and everything else. Man, thank you. You're the best. Appreciate your time, Bruce. Great job, as always. The amount of sources and the insight that you get is fantastic. We appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bruce Feldman, theathletic.com, college football, the mock draft. I put it up in the chat room. I think I put up the article. If I didn't, let me know. And then I'll